And welcome back to EDH Deck Building. I am your host, Demo, and this is the 10 most overhyped cards in the Commander format. Now, there's a little bit of explanation required here. First of all, I want to say right out of the gate, I am not saying any of the cards that I'm talking about here today are not good. They're all really good cards. However, we all know what hype is, right? Cards come out, particularly when they're spoiled. There's a whole bunch of hype about how this card's so busted, and in some cases, people even calling for these cards to get banned. And then after a year or two, the hype sort of wires down. And really, when the dust settles, these cards tend to not be nearly as popular as a lot of people thought that they were. So for example, Bootlegger Stash, which just came out, and that's not on my list here. However, I predict that it will be one of those cards, right? And again, it's not about how good it is or even necessarily how much it's used. It's about the hype versus the reality of the situation. That's what I'm talking about with these cards today, right? For me, Bootlegger Stash is a card that got a ton of buzz, a ton of hype. It still is. I'm sure there's a lot of people running out and buying it and wanting to shoehorn into all their decks. And I think we will see in due time that even though it's a great card, no question, and it certainly fits in a lot of different scenarios really, really well, I think it's not going to see nearly as much play in the format as maybe people suspect it will, right? So I'll first start off with an honorable mention, which is Cartographer's Hawk, and you could really throw in a lot of the white land ramp stuff that was coming out for a while there. It just was kind of a meme about how white couldn't draw cards or ramp in the format. And so anytime you got any white card that came out that was even remotely good at ramping, there would be a whole bunch of buzz about it. Cartographer's Hawk was certainly one of those. I don't think it's great. I never thought it was great. Even from the beginning, I just thought it was a whole lot of work to get a land into play. It probably fits good in a lot of themes. It's currently in over 6,000 decks on EDH Rec. That's pretty good. With all the great ramp cards that we've been getting lately, I'm actually surprised it sees even that much play. It probably does fit in a couple of themes decently. Maybe if you're in a bird tribal deck that isn't playing green, it might be a good fit. I mean, it still does see a little bit of play, but for sure it got a lot more buzz than I think was deserved. Getting to the actual list, though, coming in at number 10 is Strixhaven Stadium. 3-mana artifact. Tap and add a colorless. Put a point counter on Strixhaven Stadium. Whenever a creature deals combat damage to you, remove a point counter from Strixhaven Stadium. Whenever a creature you control deals combat damage to an opponent, put a point counter on Strixhaven Stadium. Then, if it has 10 or more counters on it, remove them all, and that player loses the game. And of course, that is the part that got all the buzz, right? Whenever you have a card that says either lose the game or win the game on it, it's always going to get a ton of buzz. We saw this again recently with Halo Fountain, which says win the game on it, which again, maybe, I think that's a really good card, but maybe is getting a little bit more hype than it needs to. Strixhaven Stadium is currently in a little over 10,000 decks on EDH Rec, which of course, as a colorless card, is not that much, right? It's in like 1% of the decks that it can go into. And I had recently put this on my list of cards that I was wrong about because I just thought this card was great. I had it in my top 20 from Strixhaven. I still might include it in there. It is a nice card to put in a deck where you are already doing that kind of thing, attacking a lot, getting in for damage a lot. I've never had this card work. I've shoehorned it into a couple of decks, tried to make it work. I have not even come close. I know a lot of people replied on that video that they have actually had it work for them, which is great. It certainly does work really good in certain situations, but I would say this is definitely a card that maybe got a little bit more buzz than it deserved. I mean, you can also look at the price of these cards. That usually will give you a lot of indicator as well. This card's currently like $1, right? So not exactly a super sought after one. Next up at number 9, Emergent Ultimatum. And when I mention these cards, people will go, oh, well, that's a great card actually. Yeah, it is a great card. All the cards on this list are great. But if you remember when these cards first got spoiled, when they first came out, there was tons and tons of buzz about them and hype and stuff you can do with them. And I don't know if they've necessarily lived up to the hype, right? That's sort of what I'm going here with this list. And Emergent Ultimatum, I think, is definitely one. Black, black, green, 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 blue, blue. So 7 mana sorcery. Search your library for up to 3 monocolored cards with different names and exile them. An opponent chooses one of those cards, shuffle that card into your library. You may cast the other cards without paying their mana cost and exile Emergent Ultimatum. So obviously, very powerful effect, and there is combo potential here. And a lot of times when there's combo potential with cards, that's when cards get a lot of buzz, I think. I have yet to see this in a game. I don't know how many people play it. It's in 7,300 decks currently, which is not a lot. I don't have a Sultai deck. If I did, I might throw this in. You know, even if you're getting away from the combo thing, 7 mana to go get 3 cards and you get to keep 2 of them seems like pretty good value. You know, if you're getting really big expensive stuff, it seems like great value. I think this definitely is a card, though, that probably got a little bit more hype than what it deserved. Coming in at number 8, we got In Search of Greatness. Anyone remember this card, right? Green and green enchantment. At the beginning of your upkeep, you may cast a permanent spell from your hand with mana value equal to 1 plus the highest mana value among other permanents you control without paying its mana cost. If you don't, scry 1. And this card, when it came out, I just thought it was busted. I thought it was going to go in a ton of decks. A lot of other people did as well. Started talking about all the ridiculously powerful things you could do with it. And man, I hardly ever see this card. I've seen it in a game once. I played a game with my patrons where one of my patrons had this, and interestingly enough, he didn't really do hardly anything with it. I copied it with a Mirror Maid, actually. And the only reason I did is because I actually wanted to scry 1. I really didn't care about the other parts so much. I was trying to get lands, and so I copied it so that I could scry 1 and try to get to a land. Didn't end up using the cast ability at all. I don't really know if he did either. I've put this in a couple of decks where it just didn't work out how you expect. I think a lot of people have realized that. It's a good card, no question. I'm sure there's a few decks where it works great. I haven't really gotten it to work at all for me. It's currently only in just a little over 6,000 decks on EDHREC, which for a green card is really, really low. Again, this is like a 50-cent card, which for a rare that is played in Commander, that is really, really low, right? So obviously it's not sought after at all. Are you making this card work in one of your decks? If you do, let me know. Coming in at number 7 is Birgi, God of Storytelling. That's right, I have some commanders on this list. 2 and a red, God 3/3. Whenever you cast a spell, add red. Until end of turn, you don't lose this mana as steps and phases end. And of course, the most important part of Birgi is creatures you control can boast twice during each of your turns rather than once. Am I right? Obviously, there's a backside here. Harnfell, Horn of Bounty, 5 and a red. Legendary artifact. You can discard a card to exile the top 2 cards of your library. You may play those cards this turn. And I don't know how many people are actually building around the backside. I thought that was a really interesting way to go with this deck. I actually recently built a mono red discard theme, and when I was going to do that deck, Harnfell, building around that side, I have it in the deck obviously, but I was considering using that as the commander for that deck. So Birgi again was a card that I've mentioned before about commanders that I got wrong. Currently only has 995 decks on EHREC, so under 1,000. It's still good. Like 995 is pretty good, but this was a card that I just had a pretty extreme reaction to when it got spoiled. I think a lot of other people did as well. How many decks does it go in the 99 of? I mean, maybe quite a bit more, but I think again, because of like the combo potential or the storming off potential, the possible power level, right? A lot of cards when they come out, people look at the highest possible use for those or the most powerful use for those cards and go directly to that first. And that's where a lot of this sort of artificial hype comes from, I think. Certainly is a card that I don't think a lot of people are fearing currently in the format, that's for sure. Next up at number 6, we got another commander, Asmodeus the Archfiend. 4 black devil god, 6/6. If you would draw a card, exile a top card of your library face down instead. You can pay 3 black to draw 7 cards. Hey, that's pretty good. But of course, those cards are going to get exiled, and then you can pay a black to return all cards exiled with Asmodeus the Archfiend to their owner's hand, and you lose that much life. So again, this card got a lot of buzz when it first came out. You know, the comparisons to Necropotence are obvious. Necropotence, of course, being way, way better. Asmodeus currently only has 182 decks on EDHREC. That's it. Not a lot of people going after this guy. I don't know if he gets used in the 99 a lot. I imagine not really. A lot of hype and buzz about this guy when he first came out. Like when I saw it, I didn't think it was a super interesting commander to build around. It certainly has a powerful ability, but there was definitely a lot of buzz about it, and it really hasn't played out that way at all. Coming in at number 5, Teferi, Master of Time. 2 blue, legendary Planeswalker Teferi. Enters the battlefield with 3 loyalty counters on it. You may activate loyalty abilities of Teferi, Master of Time on any player's turn, and anytime you can cast an instant. So obviously that was the thing that really got people buzzing about this card. The fact that you can do those loyalty abilities all the time. You can uptick it by 1 to draw a card and then discard a card, looting, that's okay. You can down tick it by 3 and target creature you don't control phases out, not a bad ability. And the ultimate -10 is to take 2 extra turns after this one. Now, of course, this card got a ton of buzz when it first came out, mostly because of that static ability there, where you can activate the abilities on everyone's turn. But if you activate the phase ability, you're going to get a -3 right away, so your Planeswalker immediately disappears. You have to do the looting first. Then on your opponent's turn, if they're about to swing with a big creature, you can phase it out, but then you're way down to 1 again. And, it's decent value, but I think that's about it. And I don't know how often you're actually going to get to that ultimate. I'm sure a lot of viewers of mine are like, wow, he's talking about a Planeswalker on his channel, which I don't do often. And interestingly enough, I added this card to the list because I don't really deal with Planeswalkers a whole lot. I've never seen this in a game. I actually totally forgot this card existed. I only threw it on the list because I saw the Command Zone guys talking about how this was a card that everyone was sort of freaking out about when it came out. And they're sort of not really high on it at all, right? I mean, I can't have a personal opinion about this card because I don't play Planeswalkers. They don't seem to think it's that great. It certainly is a card that got a ton of buzz when it first came out, and maybe it's getting played in other formats. I don't know. I've never seen it in Commander, and I don't know if all the hype was necessarily warranted. Coming in at number 4 is Titan's Nest. 1 black, green, and a blue enchantment. At the beginning of your upkeep, look at the top card of your library. You may put that card into your graveyard. That's a pretty handy ability. However, the one that was really getting a lot of buzz when this card first came out is exile a card from your graveyard. Add colorless. Spend this only to cast a colored spell without X in its mana cost. So just being able to exile any number of cards from your graveyard to add however much colorless mana to your mana pool. Obviously, this was causing a lot of people to freak out. They were talking about all the combo potential, all the decks could fit in. I have yet to see this card in a Commander game. I have not. I thought this was a great card too. I'm not saying this was unwarranted buzz. I thought this was a fantastic card. And again, if I had a Sultai deck, I probably would try to find a way to fit this in. Only currently in 2,200 decks on EDH Rec. That's really almost nothing. Again, it's only like a 35-cent card. Obviously, it's not sought after at all. Even if you look at the commanders like Muldrotha or Tasigur, where I think this is a really good fit. I mean, Tasigur has 3,500 decks. Muldrotha has 6,600. But yet this card is only in 2,200 decks, right? That it's just like, wow. It's not even getting played in the decks that it fits really, really good in. So again, I think it's a great card, but it is how much hype this card got when it first came out compared to how much it actually gets played, right? Coming in at number 3, and this is a little bit of an older card, As Foretold, 2 and a blue enchantment. At the beginning of your upkeep, put a time counter on As Foretold. Once each turn, you may pay 0 rather than pay the mana cost for a spell you cast with mana value X or less, where X is the number of time counters on As Foretold. So a lot of people probably don't remember this. This is right around when I first started playing Commander, and when this card came out, it got a ton of buzz because it was one of those cards where everyone's like, oh, well, you're just going to put this in every blue deck, aren't you? Because it's just going to sit there, it's going to collect counters, and on each turn, you could cast stuff for free, right? So in a Commander game, you can cast something, 1 mana value or whatever, however many counters you have, you cast something for free on your turn, and then on the next opponent's turn, you can cast something on their turn and so on down the line. So it allowed you to cast free stuff on everyone's turn. There was even comparisons made to Prophet of Krufix with this card. It was one of those cards that everyone is saying was going to go in everyone's deck, and it really doesn't see that much play at all. I almost never see it in a Commander game. It's in about 6,600 decks on EDH Rec right now, which again is just okay, right? About 1% of the decks it could go in. It's a really good card, no question. This is a card that I think you could put in almost any deck, and it's just going to give you nice value, being able to cast stuff for free. Sometimes on your turn, sometimes on your opponent's turn. I suppose if you're in a deck where you plan on casting stuff on your opponent's turn a lot, it could see more play. Like the top 3 on this list, I think are quintessential what I'm talking about here, where this card comes out and everyone just says, that's going to go in every deck, and it's not even remotely the case, right? Coming in at number 2, Manascape Refractor. Hey, remember this card, everybody? Talk about a card that got a ton of buzz and hardly ever sees play. 3 mana artifact, Manascape Refractor enters the battlefield tapped. Manascape Refractor has all activated abilities of all lands on the battlefield. That's pretty good. You may spend mana as though it were mana of any color to pay the activation cost of Manascape Refractor's abilities. Now, obviously, if you've been playing Commander for more than 2 years, you will remember the amount of buzz this got when it first got spoiled. And I don't know, maybe people can tell me in the comments below, and I'm sure there will be a lot telling me why this card isn't played. It is a 3 mana rock that enters the battlefield tapped, which isn't great. You know, right after this, we started to get a lot of great 2 mana rocks, so maybe this got pushed out. Maybe a lot of people, I think, probably shoehorned this into their decks and realized it wasn't as great. Like, the idea here, the dream scenario is my opponent has a Gaia's Cradle, now I can use that, or my opponent has a Mazavith, maybe I can use that. Maybe my opponent has a Coffers, right? The idea here is my opponents have super busted lands and I get to use those abilities as well, which of course is great. It also mana fixes, right? So I think this is still a really great card in like a 4 or 5 color deck because it's probably assuredly going to be giving you any color of mana. Currently only in 4,700 decks. That is almost nothing. For a colorless card, a mana rock, to be on only 4,700 decks is like, it's literal almost nothing. It honestly, it shows up on EDH Rec as 0%. It's actually not actually 0%, but the number is so low as a percentile of the decks that can go in, it shows up as 0. That's how little this card is played. I currently have it in no decks. I think I might have thrown it into one briefly, but you know, then you get like Liquid Metal Torque come out and it's like, okay, well, I'm in a mono red deck and Manascape Refractor is nice, but I think I want Liquid Metal Torque more. So I take it out for that one, right? I think a lot of that happened. I mean, who's still playing this card in their decks? Some people are. I think it can be really good, obviously, especially if your pod in particular likes to play those really high-powered lands, right? But 4,700? That's really almost nothing. But coming in at number 1 is Mox Amber. 0 mana, legendary artifact. Tap, add 1 mana of any color among legendary creatures and or planeswalkers you control. So a lot of people are going to think I'm crazy for putting this at number 1 because it's a good card, and it is. Never said any of these cards weren't good. They're all great. Also, they're probably going to think, well, a lot of people play that card, so what are you talking about? Again, I'm talking about the hype compared to the actuality. Okay, so getting to the actual numbers, 38,768 is what EDH Rec is telling me it currently has, all right? Now, that's pretty good. It's more than any other card on this list by far, but it is an absolute pittance compared to some of the other mana rocks played in the format. You look at Soul Ring and Arcane Signet, we got 939,000 and 672,000. So miles and miles more than a Mox Amber. People might think that's a weird comparison, but that's what people were talking about when Mox Amber first came out. That's what I thought. I thought, well, this is going to go in every deck, right? Isn't Mox Amber just going to go in every Commander deck now? A lot of people were saying that. I currently have it in 0. It certainly does fit well into certain themes. I think if you have a really cheap Commander that you can get out easy, it's great. I think if you're in an artifact theme or maybe a Joyride deck where you want to be casting cheap artifacts, it certainly is a great fit. I'm sure that's where it's being played. I don't know. Does it get played in CDH at all? I don't know. 38,000 is, again, for a mana rock, a colorless mana rock is not a lot at all. It is a $50 card, the most expensive card on this list by quite a wide margin. So people will say, oh, well, that's why it's not getting played. And I've heard that argument a lot. I don't think it's a great argument, to be quite honest. Rhystic Study is in 175,000 decks and is like a $50 card. Smothering Tithe is a $55 card and is currently in 152,000 decks. So it's an expensive card. That's why people don't play it is not the greatest argument ever. I mean, I get it. Certainly it would see more play, I think, if it was like a $2 card like Soul Ring, but just saying it doesn't see play because it's a $50 card, I don't know if that's always going to be the case, right? If a card fits really good in your deck, you're gonna splurge and spend the $50 to put it in there. I just don't think people want to splurge to spend $50 on a card that just is okay, right? It's not that great. Again, this is about hype. This card was so hyped when it first came out by me and a lot of other people as well. Again, I just assumed it was going to go in every deck. Not even close. Not even remotely close. I think I've probably seen this in a Commander game twice, maybe. Great card. Certainly has certain situations where it fits, but the hype, all the buzz about it when it first got spoiled compared to where it's actually at, there's just a grand canyon of space in between those, in my opinion. So that is my list of 10 really overhyped cards that, when they came out, everyone was buzzing and going crazy about how powerful they are, or maybe even in some case calling them for them to get banned because they're just auto includes in every deck. And that really didn't end up being the case at all with all of these, I think. What did I miss? What are some more cards that just got an absolute ton of hype when they first came out, but really don't see hardly any play in the format? Let me know in the comments below, but that is it for today, and thanks for tuning in.